Welcome back to Dead Reckoning, the Human Life Expectancy channel. In prior videos, we had boldly proposed a hierarchy of 5 objectives for our species, and our last video explored things that you can do right now to achieve the first, to help yourself to live longer, the high part of Haihua, if you will. In this video, we'll show you what you can do to help us all to live longer and to help humanity achieve the remaining 4 core objectives. Regarding the sensitive topic of propagating and evolving your genes, in the immortal words of the Isley brothers, it's your thing, do what you want to do. The decision to have children or not is a properly, intensely personal decision. However, we'll offer 3 short thoughts based on what we've covered in our Dead Reckoning videos. First, deciding whether or not to have children should be an active choice. As we've discussed, we're at the point where Homo sapiens' evolution of thought battles for supremacy with our desire to evolve our genes. And we think that thought will serve you and humanity better. In addition, birth control and other technologies make procreation much more of a choice than it has ever been. We encourage you to actively choose whether or not having children is right for you. Other than that, we can only offer our best wishes, as you, your partner, and whatever family, friends, and advisors you wish help you to decide whether you're in a position to properly provide for a child physically, emotionally, and financially, and want to be a parent. Second, since it's unclear whether overpopulation or underpopulation will be a larger problem going forward, it makes no sense to make your decision to have children or not in an attempt to solve either problem. Third, if you're going to have children, you might consider the extent to which you and your partner want to engage in volitional evolution by using IVF-PGD and EZ-PGD as it becomes available, or similar future capabilities. Selecting blastocysts for implantation that are free from genetic diseases and perhaps other selectable characteristics has important implications for your child, yourselves, including the currently required medical procedures and costs, and our species. Also, actively choosing not to engage in volitional evolution is every bit as much of a decision as deciding to engage. Either way, you're deciding the characteristics of your child. Your decision to engage or not to engage in this form of volitional evolution should also not be made lightly. Helping others to improve their life expectancies is more straightforward. There are many things that you can do. First, you can lead by example. Change your behaviors as suggested in our last video and live a long, happy life. As you help yourself to live longer, one of the simplest things you can do is to help your friends and family to do the same. Don't underestimate the impact you can have on the health of those closest to you. Eat better together, or start new exercise programs together. Joining with your friends and loved ones in new healthy behaviors is one of the most powerful ways to help them to live longer. You can also work for or invest in companies that help to extend global HLE. As we showed in our Commercial Impacts of Living Longer video, an increasing number of businesses will focus on helping people to live longer and serving the needs of older customers. Your work or investment capital can help them to bring these technologies to fruition, lengthening HLE. As you're able, you can also volunteer for or donate to causes that help people to live longer. Charities increasingly offer statistics on how many lives they save. You should request this information and give to causes that maximize lives saved per dollar donated. Many charities are focused on addressing our global existential challenges and promote the objective of extending HLE, and new ones will undoubtedly arise. You can also vote for, volunteer for, and support policies that will increase HLE. For example, you can encourage governments to adopt dead reckoning perspectives, devoting thought, time, effort, and treasure to avoid the things that kill us in proportion to their likelihood of occurrence, their potential impacts, and our advancing abilities to address them. You can also encourage them to balance the potential downsides of new technologies with their potential to extend HLE across the globe. This includes policies that explicitly weigh the potential life extension against associated risks. Currently, the U.S. disproportionately funds programs that purport to keep us safe from violence, for example, defense spending, while underfunding programs that keep us safe from the things that actually kill us in far greater numbers, such as aging, obesity, heart disease, and cancer. For example, the US defense budget is about 50% larger than the entire health budget, despite the fact that deaths from interpersonal and collective violence accounted for less than 1% of recent global deaths, and fell 28% since 2000, while the health budget addresses all causes of death. Fixing this will involve spending more on genetic medicine and aging research. People spend billions of dollars every year on drugs, endure pain and hardship of surgeries, and other interventions to improve their health. Despite the fact that aging disables 93% of people over the age of 50, in 2020, the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, spent less than 2% of its budget on genome research, less than 10% of what it spent on cancer research. Even what is spent on aging is being spent on curing diseases of aging versus curing aging itself. Renowned cell biologist and age researcher Leonard Hayflick noted in 2016, quote, "Less than 3% of the budget of the National Institute on Aging in the past decade has been spent on research on the fundamental biology of aging." This is a scandalously low level of funding for a research area that could pay such enormous dividends. One analysis showed that if $1 billion of funding, more than 3 years spending at the current rate, were to reduce elderly morbidity and health spending by 1%, it would pay for itself in Medicare savings alone within 2 months. You can also lobby to have the FDA and other regulatory bodies globally evaluate the effectiveness of drugs, genetic treatments, and medical devices, not only in the treatment of diseases, but as to their effectiveness in causing increased HLE and other enhancements, and restrict the enhancement claims of dietary supplements and other products. You can also vote for people and policies that will address the 7 existential challenges: human population growth, climate change, pandemics, nuclear weapons, natural cataclysms, global food supply transformation, and volitional evolution. This effort seems seriously under-resourced, given that these are humanity's largest existential issues and far from being resolved. Resources are badly needed to identify solutions and align countries and people around them. You can also engage politically to reduce subsidies and increase regulations and taxes on companies that hurt human life expectancy, such as oil, tobacco, and unhealthy or environmentally unsustainable foods. In 2017, the costs of unpriced externalities and the direct subsidies for fossil fuels at $3.1 trillion exceeded the subsidies for renewable energy by a factor of 19. Also, the U.S. government spends $38 billion each year to subsidize meat and dairy. U.S. agriculture policies focus on financing the production of corn, soybeans, wheat, rice, sorghum, dairy, and livestock. There are also heavy subsidies for milk and orange juice, which can contribute to obesity and other health problems. You can also engage politically to provide subsidies and reduce regulations and taxes on companies that help HLE, such as those that are helping to transform the global food supply, address climate change, develop new diagnostics and treatments, and find cures for aging. You can vote to subsidize foods that are healthy and more efficient to produce, such as vegetables, fruits, seeds, and nuts. Americans are told to fill 50% of their plates with fruits and vegetables. However, the U.S. devotes less than 1% of farm subsidies to support the research, production, and marketing of fruits and vegetables. American governments only spend $17 million, which is 0.04% of all food subsidies, each year to subsidize fruits and vegetables. You can also engage politically to support allocating public medical costs to the treatments that will result in the greatest benefit to the population and the greatest extension of HLE. This simple idea could have an enormous impact. One famous peer-reviewed study showed that allocating medical expenses based on their efficiency could save twice as many years of life at no additional cost. However, strange as it might seem, this seemingly innocuous and clearly beneficial practice has become a political third rail in the United States. In a 2009 debate about federal health care legislation, Sarah Palin, former Republican governor of Alaska and then vice presidential candidate, in trying to achieve her short-term and self-serving objective of getting elected, she erroneously charged that the proposed legislation would create a, quote, death panel of bureaucrats who would carry out triage, for example, decide whether Americans, such as her elderly parents or children with Down syndrome, were worthy of medical care. While nothing in any proposed legislation would have led individuals to being judged to see if they were worthy of this health care, this highly sensational claim has since caused all politicians to shy away from any discussion of medical cost efficiency. Aaron Carroll, editor of The Incidental Economist, writes that the idea of cost effectiveness is a, quote, forbidden topic in the healthcare debate. He says, quote, "We in the United States are so averse to the idea of cost effectiveness that when the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, the body specifically set up to compare effectiveness research, was founded, the law explicitly prohibited it from funding any cost effectiveness research at all." As it says on the website, quote, "We don't consider cost effectiveness to be an outcome of direct importance to patients." Really? He provides another example. Take the United States Preventive Service Task Force, which was set up by the federal government to raise the effectiveness of preventive health services on a scale of A to D. When it issues a rating, it almost always explicitly states that it does not consider the costs of providing a service in its assessment. It is a travesty that we allow narrow, self-serving misinformation to cause over twice the number of people to die prematurely from inefficiently allocated public health care funds. You can help by calling attention to this outrage and supporting and electing politicians that understand and are committed to addressing this situation. You can also vote for reasonable limits to consumption and support the developments of a circular economy, as we discussed in our Social Implications of Living Longer video. You can also fight to gain political representation for women, minorities, children, and finally, you can fight to gain political representation for future generations. This means supporting the seventh generation principle, as we discussed in our Ethical Principles video. So now we're moving on to our fourth objective. What can you do to help other species to live longer and avoid extinction? Plenty. You can become a vegetarian or eat cultured meat or other alternatives. Not only will this help you to live longer and lessen the risk of pandemics, as mentioned above, it'll help to reduce the billions of sentient animals that we cause to suffer and put to death each year, and reduce climate change. Also, since deforestation is largely driven by the need for more land for cattle and other livestock, becoming a vegetarian also helps to slow the current explosion of extinctions of other species. One effective altruist has shown that even if your goal is to slow climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, you could do that more effectively by donating to organizations that encourage people to become vegetarians or vegans than by donating to leading carbon offsetting organizations. You can also donate to wildlife protection organizations. There are many worthy recipients, including the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the Wildlife Conservation Society, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and the Nature Conservatory. You can also support nature reserves. The world's first modern nature reserve was established in 1821 by the naturalist and explorer Charles Waterton around his estate in Walton Hall, West Yorkshire. He spent £9,000 on the construction of a 3-mile-long, 9-foot-tall wall to enclose his park against poachers. He tried to encourage bird life by planting trees and hollowing out trunks for owls to nest in. Waterton also allowed local people access to his reserve and was described by David Attenborough as, quote, one of the first people anywhere to recognize not only that the natural world was of great importance, but that it needed protection as humanity made more and more demands of it. In Germany, Drachenfels in Ziegengebirge was protected as the first state-designed nature reserve in the country. The site was bought by the Prussian state in 1836 to protect it from further quarrying. In 1872, Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming was established as the first major nature reserve, followed soon thereafter by the Royal National Park near Sydney, Australia. The number of sanctuaries has substantially increased over the past few years. In the U.S., the National Wildlife Refuge System is a diverse network of lands and waters dedicated to conserving America's rich fish and wildlife heritage. There are currently 567 national wildlife refuges and 38 wetland management districts that make up 95 million acres of land. On a much smaller level, you can even participate in the Dog Aging Project by going to www.dogagingproject.com and signing your pooch up to receive rapamycin, which will likely extend your dog's life and increase the pool of knowledge about how this important pharmaceutical can benefit multiple species. Moving on to our fifth and last objective, there's also much you can do to engage in the propagation and evolution of ideas and information. As symbiotic propagators of both genes and thoughts, we must nurture our minds as well as our bodies. Even with the coming expansion of human life expectancy, any single human's life will be infinitesimal compared to the survival of ideas. Passing on ideas will be increasingly regarded as one of the more important things we can do during our lives. So, in addition to helping your body to live longer, you can also educate your mind and participate in the evolution and propagation of ideas. We've also discussed the importance of educating and empowering women. Educated women have been shown to have fewer and more healthy children, which will be critical for stabilizing the world's population. Women also, if you'll excuse the generalization, tend to be more collaborative and less aggressive than men. Putting them in positions of power increases our chances of finding answers to the 7 existential challenges and reduces the likelihood of conflict, calamity, and extinction. Also, in our personal impacts video, we suggested that as lives become longer, education will not only be something that the young do before entering the workforce, it will become a lifelong endeavor. More pointedly, the costs of remaining uneducated, for example, staying out of the evolution of ideas and out of the knowledge and information-driven economy, will become higher and higher. And the old adage, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance, will only become more true in the future. Fortunately, it should become progressively easier to get a good education, as high-quality materials will increasingly be available free over the internet. Accordingly, you can and should repeatedly identify subjects that interest you and become educated in those areas. In addition to getting an education, you can adopt a dead reckoning mindset and devote thought, time, effort, and treasure to avoid the things that kill us in proportion to their likelihood of occurrence, their potential impacts, and our advancing abilities to address them. We need to think differently and filter news and information through the screen of dead reckoning. Try not to be sucked in by sensational stories of individual deaths. Instead, actively refocus and reprioritize your thinking away from violence, drama, and terrorism, and toward the things that have much greater impacts on human life expectancy. For example, applying the dead reckoning mindset and using recent mortality data, for every moment you spend thinking about ways to combat terrorism, you should spend approximately 2,027 moments thinking about non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, and the behaviors you and others can adopt to reduce them. 275 moments thinking about how to combat tuberculosis, AIDS, STDs, diarrheal, and other communicable diseases. 171 moments thinking about how to avoid falls and other unintentional injuries. 70 moments thinking about road injuries and how they can be avoided, 40 moments thinking about how to avoid self-harm, and 24 moments thinking about how other forms of intentional violence can be avoided. Adopting a dead reckoning mindset also means working on recognizing, avoiding, and eradicating the 3 types of bad ideas we covered in our Evolving Ideas video. Beliefs that are not true, ideas that are intended to deceive, and those that foment tribalism and violence. This involves recognizing that some forms of nationalism can greatly complicate our ability to address the key existential challenges facing humanity. It also involves asking yourself new questions. What would I do differently if I were to live 10 or more years longer? How will lives, businesses, and societies change? And how can I help prepare myself and others for this change? So that's our first shot at what dead reckoning is and how it can help as many people as possible to live as long as possible, as soon as possible, and what you can do to help yourself and help us all to live longer. We'll continue to create videos and do what we can to support this cause. In the meantime, please hit the like button below, subscribe to the Human Life Expectancy channel to make sure you don't miss our next videos, and post comments for the topics you'd like to have us cover.